Can you believe it? Right there in the living room of my own home, my mother-in-law, arm in arm with my husband's pregnant mistress, placed a check on the coffee table and handed me the cruelest ultimatum. She said, "Take this $175,000 and get out of this house right now. My son needs a woman who can give him an heir, not a barren straw like you." In that moment, I didn't cry. I just froze. My gaze slid to the man I had called my husband for a full 5 years. He stood there, head bowed, silent as a statue. His silence hurt 1,000 times more than his mother's hateful words. But they had no idea that beneath my loose-fitting clothes, a tiny life, an unbelievable secret, was already forming. And their cruelty today would be the beginning of their downfall tomorrow. My name is Amara Lennox. That evening, I'd cooked a feast. I lit scented candles, my heart filled with excitement and pure joy. I wanted to break the happy news to my husband, Malik Sterling. The pregnancy test had shown 2 bold lines. The ultrasound results from the medical center confirmed that after all those years of waiting, I was pregnant. I honestly thought this baby would be the thread of love that could mend the tears in our marriage and silence my mother-in-law's poisonous comments for good. I was naive enough to believe in that picture. But when the clock struck exactly 7, the front door flew open. My husband walked in, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood his mother, Eleanor Sterling, and trailing behind them was a beautiful, unknown young woman in an expensive designer dress. The thing that hit me the hardest was the way she grasped Malik's arm. It was familiar and possessive. Who is that?" I stammered. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Malik didn't dare look me in the eye. He tried awkwardly to pull his arm free from the young woman, but his mother had already stepped forward. Eleanor positioned herself in front of her son and looked at me with triumphant contempt. "Let me introduce you to someone," she sneered. "This is Kira, the daughter of Victor Vance, the chairman and CEO of North Star Pharmaceuticals, the largest partner of the hospital where Malik works, and she is carrying my son's blood, the grandchild and heir you could never give me." Every one of her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I was paralyzed. The floor seemed to spin beneath me. My husband had cheated. He was having a child with another woman, and this woman was the daughter of a powerful corporation head. Suddenly, all the scattered pieces clicked together. The times he came home late, claiming meetings, the secretive phone calls in the bathroom, even that expensive designer tie he claimed was a gift. Now I understood. It was the same brand as the handbag this woman was clutching. "Why did you call me here?" I tried to keep the tremor out of my voice, though everything inside me was shattering. "Smart," Eleanor scoffed. "We called you here to give you a choice, a humane choice." She pulled a stack of papers and the check from her purse and tossed them onto the table in front of me. "Here are the divorce papers. Malik has already signed." She paused for dramatic effect. "And here is the $175,000. Take the money, sign the papers, and disappear from this house immediately. Consider it an alms from our family for the 5 years of your youth. $175,000. Alms. The word was so familiar, yet so humiliating. I looked at my husband, desperately searching for an explanation, some protection, but there was nothing. He stood there silently, head still bowed, hands clenched into fists. His silence was the answer. He was complicit. He agreed to everything. He had chosen fame and money and discarded me. 5 years of our relationship thrown away. Kira moved closer, sitting on the sofa and crossing her legs arrogantly. She ran a hand over her belly and looked at me with the eyes of a winner. "Amara, you should be reasonable. Malik loves me, and I can give him a career you could never provide in your entire life. Take the money and go. Don't make this complicated." Don't make this complicated. How ridiculous. They were the ones who had caused this tragedy. My hand resting on my thigh, involuntarily clenched into a fist. Then I slowly lifted it and gently placed it on my stomach. There, too, a small life was growing day by day. My child, and his too. But I knew I couldn't speak the truth. To speak now would be to humiliate myself, to use the baby as leverage to cling to a man who no longer wanted me. My child didn't deserve to be an instrument like that. They deserved a better life alongside a strong mother, not one begging for love. A terrible coldness suddenly wrapped around my soul. The pain morphed into contempt, and that contempt gave me a strange strength. I slowly stood up. I stopped looking at them. I picked up the check for $175,000 from the table. Eleanor and Kira watched me with satisfied smiles. They thought I had agreed, but then, to their astonishment, I tore the check into tiny pieces. "Your money is no good to me," I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "My love isn't purchasable with this filthy money." I took the pen and signed the divorce papers. "I'm leaving, but not because you're kicking me out. It's because I find life under the same roof with people like you utterly repulsive." With that, I turned and walked straight into the bedroom. Without looking back even once, I heard Eleanor scream behind me. You dare? If you don't take that money, don't you regret it later?" I regret nothing, I thought. I only regretted wasting 5 years of my youth on an undeserving man. Silently, I packed a few clothes and my personal items into a small carry-on suitcase. As I rolled the suitcase toward the exit, I walked past the three of them. Without a single word of farewell, without a single glance, I left the house and stepped out into the cold night. My hand instinctively rested on my belly. They didn't know they had driven out not one but 2 people. And they also didn't know that the lamb they had just trampled underfoot would soon return as a wolf to reclaim everything. As the taxi door slammed shut, carrying me and my little secret away from the place that was once a home, a nest, I didn't cry. The tears seemed to have dried up after the immense shock. I just sat there, staring silently at the streetlights blurring in the night. My soul was empty. 5 years, the best 5 years of my youth, I had given to him, to a love I believed was a fairy tale. And now all that remained was a cold divorce paper and the bitter truth that the fairy tale had been a lie from the start. Memories of the past 5 years flooded my mind, clear and painful, like a slow-motion film. I had met Malik on a late fall evening 5 years ago. At the time, I was a young financial analyst, fresh out of college, working at a small brokerage firm. He was a young resident physician in his final year of training at the teaching hospital where I went for a checkup. I was impressed from that first meeting, not because of his handsome looks, but because of the dedication and warmth that radiated from his eyes. Amidst the busy hospital, he was the only one who patiently listened to me and thoroughly explained my health condition. His hands were gentle and professional during the examination. He had such a kind smile, a smile that could dispel all a patient's worries and fears. After that first time, we ran into each other a few more times in the hospital cafeteria. Then the conversation started. He told me about the tough night shifts, the pressure of the medical profession, but in his voice, there was always a burning passion, a thirst to save lives. I told him about the dry world of numbers and stock markets. He listened with admiration. His eyes were full of respect. "You're such a brilliant woman, capable of understanding such complex things. That's admirable," he'd said. Our love came naturally. It was built on rushed dinner dates after his shifts, on the home-cooked meals I brought him at the hospital, and on daily texts of support and care. He wasn't rich. As a young resident, his salary barely covered the necessities, and he sent some money back home to his mother in Mississippi. But he never let me feel deprived. He might wear an old scrub top, but he'd save his entire monthly check to buy me a new dress. He might eat ramen all week, but on the weekend, he would definitely take me out to a nice restaurant. He used to say, "I'm sorry I can't give you a worthy life right now, but trust me, as soon as we get through this hard time, I'm definitely going to make you happy." I believed those words. I didn't need material possessions. I just needed his sincerity. And I didn't just say I would support him. I used my skill, a skill I had never revealed to anyone, not even him, to secretly advance his career. Dear listeners, I had a secret. Outwardly, I was just an ordinary office worker with a meager salary, But in reality, I was an anonymous investor in the stock market. It was an innate talent I discovered back in college. I had a unique intuition for numbers. I could analyze and predict market fluctuations in an astonishing way. With the small inheritance my parents left me after their fatal accident, I secretly invested, and that money grew into a sum many people couldn't earn in a lifetime. I didn't use that money for luxury. I continued to live modestly because I was scared that wealth would change me and attract insincere people. I simply wanted to find a man who loved the real me, the ordinary girl named Amara Lennox, and when I met Malik, I thought I had found that man. I used my talent and my secret fortune to be a stepping stone for him. He had talent, but in the complex environment of a major hospital, talent alone isn't enough. He needed opportunities, connections. I secretly used my investment fund under a different name to donate a substantial amount to the hospital for the purchase of state-of-the-art medical equipment. In return, I made only one condition: to create opportunities for young, talented doctors like Malik to participate in major surgeries and be sent overseas for training. The opportunity came. He was selected for a team that would perform a complicated heart surgery, an operation previously reserved only for chiefs of staff. He mastered it brilliantly. His name started getting noticed. Then he was sent on a short study trip to Boston to learn advanced medical technologies. When he returned, he seemed to have gained wings. He successfully performed one complex surgery after another, saving many patients. He quickly rose from an ordinary resident to one of the youngest and most talented surgeons at the medical center. He was so happy. He would hug me and say everything was thanks to luck and my constant support. He didn't know that the goddess of luck was the very girl he was holding in his arms. I didn't tell him the truth. I didn't want him to develop an inferiority complex. I just wanted to stand quietly in the background, witnessing his success and his happiness. I naively believed my silent sacrifice would be rewarded with eternal love. For 5 years, I nurtured that love, feeding his career with everything I had. I paved a road sprinkled with roses with my own hands, never expecting that I wouldn't be the one walking beside him when he finally stepped onto that path. After Malik solidified his position at the hospital, we decided to get married. It was the decision I had waited for so long, but right there, the first cracks in our love story began to appear. And the person who created those cracks was none other than his mother, Eleanor. When he first introduced me to her, she greeted me with a seemingly warm smile. But behind that smile, I sensed a scrutinizing, coldly calculating gaze. She didn't ask about my work or my character. She only asked questions like, "What do your parents do for a living? How many siblings do you have? What's your salary?" When she found out I was an orphan and lived modestly, the smile faded slightly from her lips. From then on, she began to interfere in our relationship. She often called Malik, insinuating that I wasn't a suitable match for him. "My son, you are a respected doctor now. Marriage isn't just about marrying who you love, but who helps your career. This girl might be sweet, but with her background, she'll only be a burden to you. Look at the city director's daughter. Beautiful and from a good family. If you marry someone like that, wouldn't your career advance even further?" At first, Malik still stood by me. He argued with his mother. "Mom, don't talk like that. I love Amara for who she is, not for anything else. I don't need anyone's help. I can make it on my own." Those words moved me deeply. I believed our love was strong enough to overcome all prejudices. But then, another figure emerged who changed everything. It was Kira. She was the only daughter of Victor Vance, the CEO of North Star Pharmaceuticals, the strategic partner and largest sponsor of the hospital where Malik worked. Kira was beautiful, sharp, and incredibly arrogant. She was used to getting whatever she wanted, and this time she wanted Malik. She pursued him openly. Even though he had a girlfriend, she used tactics that an ordinary girl like me could never compete with. She gifted him expensive designer presents. She leveraged her father's contacts to create opportunities he couldn't refuse. Under the guise of business meetings, she constantly invited him to elite restaurants and prestigious clubs. She showed him another world, a world of power, fame, a world he had never experienced. Most importantly, she struck right at the core of his mother's ambitions. Eleanor rejoiced like a gold prospector who had found a treasure when she learned that Kira was the daughter of a corporation head. She saw her as the golden daughter-in-law, the master key that could open the door to a brilliant future for her son. She openly began trying to push the two of them together. She often invited Kira over for dinner, treating her even more warmly than her own son. In contrast, she became increasingly cruel and unkind toward me. Every time I was around, she would intentionally mention Kira, praise her relentlessly, and then turn to me just to hurt me. Now that is a woman from a good family, beautiful, capable, and with connections. If my Malik marries her, one phone call from her father, and he'll have a luxury private clinic instantly instead of bending over backward for others. These words were like a poison slowly seeping into Malik's consciousness. A man from humble beginnings who had fought so hard to reach his current position, how could he not waver in the face of such a tempting prospect? He began to change. He no longer refused Kira's invitations. He came home later and later. He smelled of strange perfume. He started lying to me. Our phone calls became less frequent, the texts shorter and colder. Our love didn't die suddenly. It died slowly, in silence, coldness, and lies. I noticed all of it. My heart ached unbearably, but I didn't make a scene. I didn't stage any jealousy dramas. I just hoped in silence. I hoped it was only a temporary infatuation. I hoped he would eventually realize who truly loved him and come back to me. I naively believed in our 5-year love, believed in the promises he had made. But I didn't know that all hope becomes meaningless when a man changes his heart, when ambition is greater than love. The crack grew day by day, and the day our marriage would shatter was closer than ever. Dear listeners, there is perhaps no pain stronger than betrayal by the person you love the most. It's not like a physical wound that heals with time. It's like a poison that slowly penetrates every cell, every tissue, eating away all belief, all hope. And that was exactly the pain I experienced in the following months. My marriage didn't collapse with a loud bang. It died slowly, in coldness, lies, and deceit. Malik, the man I once thought was my whole world, had become a completely different person. He was no longer the warm, sincere doctor. He had been sucked into the whirlpool of fame and high society that Kira had shown him. He came home later and later. His excuses became more threadbare and unbelievable. Sometimes an urgent meeting, sometimes an emergency surgery, sometimes dinner with an important partner. But I knew that behind those excuses hid romantic meetings with Kira. I accidentally saw joint photos that Kira's friends posted on social media. They were dining together in lavish restaurants, attending pompous parties. He looked at her with a look he hadn't given me in a long time, a look of admiration, of conquest. Every time I saw those photos, 1,000 needles pierced my heart. But I didn't make a scene. I didn't rush into a confrontation or accuse him. I simply kept silent. I lied to myself. I made excuses for him, thinking maybe he was forced, that these were only necessary business relationships. I tried to hold on, tried to believe in the remaining threads of our 5-year bond. I tried to be a more perfect wife. I learned to cook better meals. I cleaned the house even more thoroughly. I dressed up nicer when he came back. I hoped my tenderness, my patience could win him back, but I was wrong. My silence didn't wake him up. It only gave him the courage to go further. He mistook my gentleness for stupidity, my silence for consent. He became more open. He no longer hid. There were nights when he came home at midnight. He smelled of women's perfume, a strange, expensive scent, not the light one I usually used. There were lipstick marks on his shirt collar. When I questioned him, he didn't even try to deny it. He simply pushed my hand away and said in a cold, tired voice, "Don't ask any more questions. I'm exhausted." My mother-in-law, Eleanor, openly gloated. She viewed my suffering as her victory. She didn't stop sprinkling salt on my wound. Every time Kira came to the house, she intentionally called me in and forced me to serve, to pour tea, to cut fruit for the honored guest. She wanted me to see with my own eyes how her son and his mistress were affectionate with each other. She wanted me to feel the humiliation and the pain so that I would leave on my own. "Amara is modest and obedient, my dear," she said to Kira, but her gaze was directed right at me. "When you become the daughter-in-law of this house, she'll be here to serve you and take care of you. You won't have to lift a finger." She viewed me as a maid, a free servant for her future daughter-in-law. The cruelty of the mother-in-law, the weakness of the husband, and the arrogance of the mistress, all of it formed a vice that squeezed my life and choked the last remnants of my hope. I lived in hell in those days. I lost weight, looked haggard. The smile completely vanished from my lips. I thought about divorce, about letting go and freeing myself, but I couldn't make the decision. 5 years of love, could I just forget that? I still loved him, still hoped for a miracle. And the miracle did happen, but it came at the most impossible moment. In the time when my marriage was plunging into its darkest days, as I stood on the edge of the abyss of despair, a ray of light suddenly appeared. I discovered I was pregnant. Dear listeners, the feeling when I first saw the pregnancy test with 2 red lines was magical. All the pain, all the hurt inside me dissolved, replaced by boundless happiness, by tears of excitement. I was going to be a mother. I was going to have a child, the crystallization of our love. I hugged the pregnancy test and cried alone in the bathroom. But this time, they weren't tears of suffering, but tears of joy. This child was not just a small life. It was my only hope. In that moment, I naively believed that their arrival would be the miracle that could save our marriage teetering on the brink. I thought that if Malik learned he was going to be a father, he would definitely change. He would understand what a real family is. He would come back to me, and we would rebuild a happy nest, him, me, and the baby. This hope gave me a strange strength. I was no longer depressed and suffering. I started taking better care of myself. I ate nutritious food. I read books on motherhood. I wanted to prepare everything perfectly to welcome my little angel. I also formulated a plan. I wouldn't tell him the news over the phone or in an ordinary way. I wanted to prepare a big surprise for him, a surprise that could melt his hardened heart. I chose the day of our 5th wedding anniversary to carry out this plan. I took the day off, spending the entire day decorating the house. I bought the roses he loved, lit romantic scented candles. I went to the kitchen and cooked all the dishes he had once praised the most when we had just started dating. I even found and bought the same bottle of wine we drank on the night he proposed to me. I wanted to recreate the atmosphere of our happiest days, to remind him how much we had loved each other. I carefully placed the pregnancy test with the 2 lines and the ultrasound result with the blurry picture of the little life into a pretty gift box and set it in the center of the dining table. I pictured the evening. He would return, surprised by the romantic atmosphere. We would eat together, reminisce about old memories, and then I would give him this box. He would open it, pause, and then explode with happiness. He would hug me tightly, beg for forgiveness, and promise never to leave the 2 of us and the baby again. I painted such a beautiful and perfect picture in my head. I put on a new dress, applied light makeup, sat at the dining table, and waited excitedly. 7 o'clock. He still hadn't arrived. I called him, but he didn't answer. I started to worry. Was he with her again? Had he forgotten what day it was? I tried to chase away the negative thoughts, convincing myself that he might have an urgent surgery. I waited patiently. 9, 10 o'clock. The candles had almost burned down. The food on the table had grown cold, and my heart chilled with it. Just before 11 o'clock, I finally heard the sound of his car in the driveway. Hope reawakened in my heart. I rushed to the door, but that hope was brutally shattered. The door flew open. He came back, but not alone. Beside him stood his mother, Eleanor, and trailing behind them was that Kira, with a provocative smile on her lips. They hadn't come to congratulate me on our anniversary. They had come to deliver the ultimatum and officially drive me out of his life and out of that house. Dear listeners, There are moments in life when time seems to stand still. For me, that moment was when those three appeared at the door, bringing with them a storm ready to destroy everything. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, decorated for an anniversary that would never happen, and looked at them like strangers. The flickering of the candles I had lit only emphasized the mockery in Kira's face, the triumph in Eleanor's eyes, and the pitiful guilt in Malik's face. The beautiful gift box on the table containing a whole hope, a whole little life, suddenly seemed so inappropriate and meaningless. What kind of celebration did you organize here? Did you decide to make a last attempt to hold on to him? Eleanor spoke first. Her voice was sharp as a knife, slicing through the suffocating silence. I'll tell you openly, don't waste your time. My Malik has already made his decision. He's divorcing you and marrying Kira. She's carrying the heir of our family, she said, nodding toward Kira, who immediately jutted out her belly. It was like a provocation, a confirmation of victory. The heir. Those two words struck my bleeding heart like a sledgehammer. All those years she had called me a barren straw, and now she had what she wanted. I looked at Malik, trying to find some reaction, some remnant of his former feelings, but nothing. He continued to stand with his head down, avoiding my gaze. His silence was the cruelest confession. He had made his choice. He had chosen the future on the red carpet and was ready to throw away the past, to throw away the woman who had stood by him through the hardest times. And then the curtain fell, just as I told you already. Eleanor threw the check and the divorce papers at me. Kira spoke insulting words full of arrogance, and Malik just stood there, a helpless accomplice. I stood there and heard every word. The initial pain quickly turned into numbness, and then into absolute contempt. I had truly loved this man. I had truly sacrificed for these people. Suddenly I felt so foolish. Foolish for believing too much in a non-existent love. Foolish for trying to maintain a marriage rotten from the inside. My hand, resting on my thigh, clenched involuntarily. Then I slowly lifted it and gently placed it on my stomach. The warmth, the sacred connection, suddenly awoke. My beloved baby, forgive me for making you a witness to such a terrible scene before your birth. Forgive me for not being able to give you a worthy father, but don't be afraid. From now on, you only have your mama, and Mama promises you, Mama will give you the best in this world. Mama won't let anyone hurt you. A strange strength suddenly awakened within me, the power of motherhood. I was no longer the weak, suffering girl Amara. I was a mother, and I had to protect my child. I knew I couldn't tell the truth about this pregnancy. If I did, what would they think? They would think I was using the child as a weapon to hold him, to beg for pity. They would never believe it was Malik's child. Or worse, they would try to take my child away if they knew it was a boy. No, I couldn't allow my child to grow up in such a toxic environment. I had to go. I had to take my child away from these people. The last tear fell, a tear washing away the love. I lifted my head and looked directly at them. There was no more pain in my eyes, only cold determination. I tore up the check, signed the divorce papers, and spoke my final words full of contempt. Then I turned and went into the bedroom. I took nothing but my purse with my most important documents. As I walked past them, I didn't even look at them. For me, they were dead from that moment on. I left the house and stepped out into the cold night. I didn't look back. The past was behind me. Ahead of me lay a completely new path, a path I had to walk alone. But I was no longer alone because I knew I carried a small, priceless life inside me, a source of motivation. The tears had overcome me, but they didn't drown me. They washed away all illusions, all weakness, and allowed a new person to be reborn. A stronger Amara, more determined and ready to face any storm. Dear listeners, you might think that after the betrayal of my husband, the humiliation by his family, pregnant and alone, I would break down, look for a place to cry, and sink into pain. But no, I didn't. Enough tears had been shed. Enough suffering had been experienced. That night, I didn't go to a friend. I didn't rent a cheap motel room. I called an elite taxi and drove straight to an address that Malik and his family would probably never have guessed. It was the Lakeshore Grand Penthouses, the most elite and expensive residential complex in Chicago, where only true magnates and oligarchs could afford to live. I entered the luxurious lobby and went straight to the elevator designated for the penthouses. I swiped my black magnetic card, and the elevator took me to the top floor. The elevator doors opened. Before me lay a duplex apartment of almost 5,500 square feet, with a luxurious, refined design and a gigantic glass wall overlooking the entire night city, twinkling in magical lights. This was my real home. An apartment I had bought with my self-earned money but had never moved into because I naively wanted to build a common nest with my husband from scratch on our own. Dear listeners, it's time to reveal the biggest secret of my life. I wasn't an ordinary financial analyst with a tiny salary. That was just a shell, a role I had created for myself. In truth, I was a professional stock market investor, an anonymous shark in the financial world. The innate ability to analyze and predict, combined with the small fortune my parents left me, helped me secretly build a massive empire, starting from my college days. I might not own a large corporation, but my fortune was probably greater than the entire North Star Pharmaceuticals of Kira's family combined. But I had always hidden it. I had chosen a modest, even somewhat ascetic life because I was scared. Scared that the money would change me, scared that it would attract lying, self-serving people. I had always longed for the sincere love of a man who came to me for myself, not for my wealth. And I thought Malik was exactly that man. I was willing to give up everything, agreed to live under an ordinary mask, just to be with him. But I was wrong. That was the biggest mistake of my life. That night, standing in the middle of my luxurious penthouse, I felt no more pain. I felt only bitter irony. I had given up an entire kingdom to become Cinderella. And in the end, the prince I chose had cruelly discarded me. But no matter. Cinderella had now returned to her palace, and this time she wouldn't be naive anymore. She would become the queen. The first thing I did, I didn't cry. I called my closest assistant, a leading financial expert I had hired many years ago. "Hello, Tony," I said in a cold, determined voice. "Activate Plan B for me. All investments, all the indirect support we've provided to the teaching hospital and personally to Dr. Malik Sterling over the past 3 years are to be withdrawn immediately and completely." Second, I called an elite service agency. I asked them to assemble the best team for me: a leading gynecologist, a personal nutritionist, a yoga instructor for pregnant women, and a professional housekeeper. I told them, I only need the best of the best. Cost is no object. And finally, I stood before the large mirror and looked at my reflection. I was no longer the humble, simple girl Amara. I was returning to my true self, an independent, strong, and powerful woman. I placed my hand on my belly where my little life was growing. Little one, from now on, the two of us will start a new life, a life no one can look down upon, where no one can hurt us. Mama will give you the best in this world. A completely new Amara was born the next day. I was no longer depressed, no longer suffering. I began the strictest and most scientifically rigorous pregnancy care program. I read books, listened to classical music, did yoga. I transformed my penthouse into a paradisiacal oasis of calm for the two of us. I cut all ties with the past. I threw away my old phone number. I no longer communicated with mutual friends. To them, Amara had vanished. I thought I would live my life in peace, raise the child alone. But apparently, fate still wanted to play a trick. It arranged a meeting for me and those people that was unpredictable. A meeting where the roles would completely reverse, and not me, but they would have to bow their heads. The phoenix had indeed risen from the ashes. Dear listeners, while I began my new life as a single mother in prosperity and peace in another place, the people who had driven me out of their lives were also joyfully starting a new chapter they thought was perfect. Just 1 month after I left, the most luxurious and pompous wedding in the city was organized. The groom was none other than Malik Sterling, my ex-husband. And the bride was, of course, Kira, the golden daughter carrying the family heir. Their wedding became a huge event, reported by all the tabloids and society magazines. People admired the luxury of the ceremony, the multi-million-dollar wedding dress, and the supercar convoy that stretched for miles. People raved about the fateful love story between a talented doctor and a lady of rank. They painted a modern fairy tale where there was no place for a poor ex-wife like me. I saw those photos on the computer screen in my luxurious penthouse. I saw Malik's radiant smile, Kira's smug, triumphant face, and my former mother-in-law, Eleanor. My heart didn't twitch once. I felt no more pain, no jealousy. I just found it ridiculous. Can happiness built on lies and betrayal ever last? And as I had predicted, Malik's life after the wedding was not as rosy as he had imagined. He got everything he wanted. Immediately after the wedding, his father-in-law, Victor, kept his promise. He invested a massive sum to open a private clinic for his son-in-law named Sterling Private Clinic. The clinic was located in a prestigious area, equipped with the most modern medical devices and widely promoted in all media. Malik suddenly went from being a salaried staff doctor to a young clinic director, a successful entrepreneur. He truly had ascended to the heavens. His mother, Eleanor, was on cloud nine. She moved into the luxurious mansion that her daughter-in-law's family had gifted her son. She had maids, was chauffeured. All day long, she did nothing but enjoy herself, shop, and attend high society gatherings. Everywhere she went, she boasted about her talented son and her golden daughter-in-law. She had reached the peak of smug complacency. Yet, behind that glossy facade hid an unpleasant truth. Although Malik had become a director, in the eyes of his wife's family, he remained forever an opportunist, a man from poor beginnings who had only risen thanks to his wife. His father-in-law, Victor, was an extremely authoritarian and patriarchal man. He openly despised his son-in-law. All decisions in the clinic, from staffing to finance, had to go through him. Malik was only the nominal director, a workhorse under his father-in-law's guidance. At family dinners, he was constantly lectured and reprimanded by his father-in-law and his wife's brothers. "You need to know your place. Without this family, you'd just be a pathetic little doctor." These words were like thorns pricking Malik's already inflated ego. His married life was not happy either. Kira, after getting what she wanted, quickly revealed her true nature as a capricious, spoiled lady. She wasn't interested in her husband's work at all. She didn't care about the family. All day, she just shopped and met friends. The pregnancy, the weapon that had helped her secure this marriage, now became an excuse to torment her husband. She forced him to wait on her, indulging all her crazy whims. If he did anything wrong, she would cry and threaten to complain to her father. And every time, Malik had to bow his head and apologize. He lived in a vice of suffocation, having lost all freedom and the voice of a man. He began to regret. In the late nights, when Kira was sound asleep, he often went out onto the balcony and smoked alone. He remembered the earlier days, the days that were poor but unbelievably happy with me. He remembered the modest but warm dinners. He remembered the tenderness, the understanding, and my silent sacrifice. He realized that he had lost the most valuable thing, but it was already too late. He had chosen this path himself and could no longer turn back. He could only grit his teeth, endure, and continue his fake, happy life. He didn't know this was only the beginning. A hidden storm, a clever and cruel revenge, was secretly being prepared and was about to break over him, sweeping away everything he possessed. While their family wallowed in a false victory, in another place, in the penthouse atop the Lakeshore Grand Penthouses, I quietly began my own game. I didn't choose revenge through scandals and intrigue. To me, those methods were too primitive and would only degrade me. I would take revenge, but in a different way, smarter, more painful, and harsher. I wouldn't just reclaim what was lost. I would destroy their entire empire with the same weapons they had used to seduce my husband: money and power. As an anonymous investor, a shark in the financial market, I had every means to do so. My plan was developed with incredible care and precision with the help of my team of leading financial experts, led by Tony Clark. My target was not just Malik's small clinic, but the entire system. His father-in-law's pharmaceutical empire, North Star Pharmaceuticals. I knew this was the root, the source of power for all of them. If I cut this root, the whole tree would wither. My first strike wasn't a direct attack. It was a secret takeover, a storm forming from small waves. I had the entire supply chain of North Star Pharmaceuticals and Sterling Private Clinic analyzed. I discovered their biggest weakness: dependence on foreign suppliers for medical equipment and specialized pharmaceutical preparations. They had only a few exclusive suppliers. That was their Achilles heel. I instructed my investment fund, through a series of subsidiaries and complex transactions that obscured my identity, to launch a campaign to acquire shares in those very supply companies. It was a costly fight, but money was no problem for me. In just 2 months, I secretly became the largest controlling shareholder of 3 leading European medical device companies and 2 major Swiss pharmaceutical companies, irreplaceable partners of North Star Pharmaceuticals. With the trump cards in hand, I started tightening the noose. As a major shareholder, I made new demands. I required these companies to temporarily suspend the delivery of new generation equipment and preparations to the American market, under the pretense of reviewing business strategy and seeking a new exclusive distributor. Of course, the new partner company was to be an entity I founded myself. The supply crisis began. Malik's Sterling Private Clinic suffered first and hardest. They had just opened and needed the most modern equipment for their advertising, but now all their orders were being rejected or indefinitely postponed. The CTS scanner, the 4D ultrasound devices they had promised patients, remained only on paper. Specialized cancer medications. The latest cardiological drugs they had advertised as exclusive suddenly vanished from the market. Patients began to complain. People who had paid for premium health packages were now not receiving the corresponding services. The reputation of the clinic, into which they had invested hundreds of millions of dollars, began to plummet catastrophically. Malik ran around like a moth to a flame, desperately searching for alternative suppliers, but to no avail. All the major suppliers were already under my control. He didn't even suspect that the invisible enemy choking him was his ex-wife whom he had discarded. His father-in-law's pharmaceutical giant was in no better shape. They lost profitable distribution contracts, revenue fell rapidly, stock prices began to drop sharply. Victor, the man always so proud of his power, was now also panicking and found no peace. He constantly cursed and blamed Malik, claiming his son-in-law's incompetence had brought disaster upon the whole family. Malik's life truly became hell. Work was collapsing. At home, he was humiliated by his father-in-law. His wife made demands and was jealous all day. He suffered from insomnia, lost a lot of weight. He recognized the price of his choice, but he didn't yet know that this storm had just begun. My next strike would be even more destructive. It would completely shatter not only his career, but also the last bit of hope within him, and it would happen on a day, at a moment, he least expected. Dear listeners, while the storm I orchestrated was secretly destroying my ex-husband's family's empire, in another world, my own world, I was experiencing the most peaceful and happy days. All the revenge and retribution plans I entrusted to my professional team, while I dedicated my mind, time, and heart to a more sacred mission: motherhood. 9 months and 10 days of pregnancy might be a time of hardship and worry for many women, especially without a man by their side. But for me, it was a priceless gift, a journey of self-discovery and self-love I had never experienced before. I was no longer the girl Amara who was always busy for others. Now I learned to live slower, to love and care for my own body, the little life that grew inside me day by day. Every morning, I no longer rushed out. I woke up to classical music, prepared myself a nutritious breakfast according to the expert's menu. I spent hours reading, not dry financial volumes, but books on child rearing and classic literary works. I wanted my child to be exposed to the most beautiful and purest things, even in the womb. My penthouse transformed into a garden paradise. There was green and fresh flowers everywhere. I set up an entire large room as a nursery, designing the decor myself, choosing every piece of furniture, every little toy. Everything had to be the best, the safest. I spared no expense in hiring top specialists to ensure my child was born and raised under ideal conditions. A personal yoga instructor came every day to teach me gentle exercises that kept my body supple and healthy. Every weekend, there were classes for birth preparation and infant care. I prepared everything not just with money, but with all the love of a mother. I didn't feel lonely at all. On the contrary, I felt more fulfilled than ever. The baby in my belly was the best companion. Every time I felt a light kick, every time I saw my belly grow, my heart filled with unspeakable happiness. I often talked to the child, told them fairy tales, sang lullabies. I wanted them to know that no matter how complicated and cruel the outside world was, here in Mama's arms, they would always be safe, loved unconditionally. Of course, there were moments in the quiet late nights when the sadness of the past suddenly surfaced. Sometimes my heart would clench when I saw happy couples holding hands, a man gently stroking his wife's belly. I wondered why my child couldn't also enjoy such complete love, but I quickly chased away those weak thoughts. I told myself that a bad father, a father who cruelly leaves mother and child, is better than no father at all. My child didn't need a father like that. They only needed me, and that was enough. Malik's betrayal hadn't broken me. It had solidified an extraordinary independence and strength within me. And then, the day I had waited for the most arrived. I chose the Ascension Medical Center, one of the most prestigious and expensive hospitals, to welcome my child. I booked the VIP birth package with a personal medical team, nurses, and the best medical care. I spared no expense because my child deserved it. I wanted the moment of their birth to be the most sacred and perfect. But how was I to know that this seemingly perfect choice would turn out to be an ironic twist of fate, plunging me into the most dramatic of meetings, a meeting that would change everything? While my child and I enjoyed the most peaceful and happy days, in another place, the storm I had sown raged relentlessly. The Sterling Private Clinic, the pride and hope of Malik and his wife's entire family, plunged into an unprecedented crisis. The hidden storm I had orchestrated had now transformed into a tsunami, crashing over and destroying their seemingly solid empire. The supply crisis for medical equipment and pharmaceutical preparations became increasingly serious. All doors seemed to have slammed shut in Malik's face. He flew to Europe, visiting the headquarters of the supply companies to negotiate. But all he received were cold rejections, polite apologies citing changed business strategies. He had no idea that the person sitting in the boardroom making those decisions was the largest anonymous investor from Chicago. He returned defeated and humiliated. Sterling Private Clinic, once advertised as a modern international world-class clinic, now suffered from a lack of everything. Expensive, complex equipment stood idle without spare parts. The specialized medications they had so loudly advertised suddenly vanished, with no stock remaining for patients. Patients who had paid enormous sums for international medical services now felt cheated. They began to complain, then to demand refunds. Then they came to the clinic with protests. "Give us our money back, fraudsters! An international clinic worse than a regional hospital!" The daily shouts and banners turned the clinic from a respected place into a bankrupt bazaar. The clinic's reputation sank catastrophically. Talented doctors whom Malik had recruited with generous salaries began to resign one by one. They didn't want their reputation buried along with the failing clinic. Malik ran around like a moth to the flame. He had to deal with patients, try to retain staff, and find new suppliers. But all his efforts were in vain. My hand reached too far, choking him from all sides. His family life also became hell. His father-in-law, Victor, who had invested a fortune in this clinic, now faced the risk of losing everything. He unleashed all his fury on his son-in-law. "Failure, good for nothing. I entrusted such a thing to you and you couldn't maintain it. What have you even done? All you can do is sponge off my family." He incessantly ranted at every meal in front of the whole family and relatives. Kira, his princess wife, was no longer gentle and loving either. When she saw her cash cow drying up, she changed. "How are you even working? Can you imagine how much face I've lost with my friends because of you? If you don't solve this problem, don't blame me if I become ruthless." The people who had once elevated him to the heavens now united to push him into the abyss of humiliation. He realized the bitter truth. They had never loved or respected him. They had viewed him as a tool, a chess piece on the board of their interests. As long as he was useful, they spoiled him, but when he failed, they were ready to discard him without a shred of regret. And then came the cruelest blow. North Star Pharmaceuticals also began to collapse under the influence of the supply crisis and other financial attacks orchestrated by my investment fund. Stock prices fell relentlessly. To save himself, Victor made a cruel decision: to declare bankruptcy for Sterling Private Clinic, to cut off the loss-making tumor and shed the responsibility of the incompetent son-in-law. Malik lost everything. In just a few months, he went from a young director, a model of success, to a bankrupt failure. He was thrown out of the clinic he had once been so proud of. He had to move out of the luxurious mansion and return with his mother to a small apartment. Kira left him after a huge scandal. The boy she was carrying was no longer an heir, but a liability. Malik truly experienced the fall from heaven to hell. He recognized the price of his choice. He got fame and money, but only for an instant. And to get that, he lost something far more valuable: sincere love, a wife who was willing to sacrifice everything for him, and a child whose existence he didn't even know about. In the darkest and most desperate days of his life, my image surfaced in his consciousness, tormenting and haunting him. He wondered, where is Amara? How is she living? But he could never guess that the ex-wife he longed for was the very person who had orchestrated the entire tragedy of his life, and fate prepared a meeting for them once again, a meeting under circumstances more ironic than one could imagine. Dear listeners, life sometimes has truly ironic twists, twists that even the most talented scriptwriters couldn't invent. It's like a grand chess game where each of us is just a small piece moving according to the invisible moves of fate. I thought that after separating from Malik, our lives would be parallel lines that would never cross again. I would live my life in prosperity and peace with my future child, and he would pay for his mistakes. But I was wrong. Fate decided we still owed each other one encounter, a final confrontation under circumstances more cruel than one could imagine, circumstances where life and death were separated by a single moment. On the day the clock struck exactly 6 p.m, I was sitting in a meditative posture on my yoga mat, listening to gentle classical music, when the first contractions started. At first, they were just slight contractions, but they quickly became more intense and stronger. I knew my child, my little angel, had decided to come early. My assistant, Tony Clark, a calm, professional man in his middle age, didn't panic for a second. He immediately called the hotline of the Ascension Medical Center, where I had booked the royal birth package months ago. Everything was ready. The presidential delivery room, the best medical team led by Dr. William Nelson, the golden hands of American obstetrics. Everyone was waiting for me in full readiness. The ambulance, with its sirens, tore through the night silence of the city. I lay on the stretcher, biting my lip to keep from screaming. My hand instinctively rested on my belly, whispering to the child, "Little one, don't be afraid. You'll see Mama soon. We'll get through this together." I was absolutely calm, trusting in the professionalism and the premium services I had paid for. I wanted my child to be born under ideal conditions. But as the saying goes, man proposes, God disposes. Dr. Nelson was involved in a severe accident on the freeway and couldn't arrive in time to help me. The situation was critical. The clinic director, who personally received me, hurriedly reassured me. "Don't worry. We have an emergency plan. Although Dr. Nelson can't be present, we will bring in another doctor. He is the best surgeon and gynecologist in our clinic who recently joined us. He practiced for many years in Boston. His professionalism is incredibly high. He has mastered births far more complicated than this. Please trust us absolutely. We are calling Dr. Sterling immediately." Dr. Sterling. That name, an ordinary name, made my heart skip a beat for a second. Perhaps I was too sensitive. In that moment, writhing in pain, I didn't have the strength to dwell on such coincidences. I just nodded in a semi-conscious state, entrusting my fate and the babies to the hands of the clinic and this unknown Dr. Sterling. I was quickly wheeled into the VIP delivery room. Everything was modern, luxurious, but I barely noticed. Nurses surrounded me. Someone measured my blood pressure. Someone prepared instruments. Everyone worked like programmed mechanisms. I only heard snippets of conversation, full of confidence. "It's a good thing Dr. Sterling is here. We couldn't have handled this case without him." "Right. Since he came to us, how many complicated births has he already performed?" A few minutes later, the delivery room door flew open. A man in blue scrubs and a cap entered. His face was almost completely covered by a mask. Only his eyes were visible. He walked quickly but determinedly, radiating the professionalism of a senior doctor. He said nothing, only gestured to the head nurse for the patient's file. He took the file, his sharp eyes quickly skimming the lines. Patient Amara Lennox, 30 years old, 39 weeks pregnant, breech presentation, signs of premature labor, water broken, medical history, unremarkable. He read in a deep, familiar voice, a voice I could never forget, even if it were reduced to dust. When I heard that voice, my entire body froze. The pain of the contractions seemed to stop for a second. That voice, it couldn't be a coincidence. Trembling, I lifted my head and tried to look into the doctor's eyes. Those eyes were still deep, with a slight hint of sadness, but radiating determination. They were the eyes I had loved, the eyes I had looked into 1,000 times over 5 years. "Malik," I whispered. My voice was weak, barely audible, drowned out by the sounds of the equipment and my heavy breathing. The doctor flinched. He jerked his head up from the file and looked me straight in the eye. And in that moment, as our gazes met, the whole world stopped. His eyes, which had just been professionally cold, became utterly stunned, shocked to the core. He froze. The patient file slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. The white papers flew around the room. "Amara! Amara!" he burst out. His voice trembled, unable to believe what he was seeing. How can this be you? What are you doing here?" Yes, the best doctor called in to help, the only one who could save me and my child at that moment, was ironically Malik, my ex-husband, the father who had abandoned the child and was now about to deliver them with his own hands. After the bankruptcy of the clinic and the rejection by his wife's family, he had, thanks to his talent and experience, secured a position as a surgeon right at this international hospital. He had tried to start anew, tried to bury the sinful past, but he never thought fate would bring him such a meeting, such cruel atonement. The entire delivery room suddenly fell into a chilling silence. Only the steady sounds of the heart rate monitor could be heard. The nurses, the medical staff, all froze, looking at us without understanding what was going on. They knew that the talented doctor, the pride of the clinic, and the mysterious VIP patient obviously shared a very complicated past. Malik still stood there, frozen like a statue. He looked at me, then at my large belly. His face under the mask changed expression, from shock to confusion, then to indescribable consternation. "Pregnant? You're pregnant?" he stammered. One hand pointed at my belly. His voice was shaking. "How long? How many months? Whose child is this? Did you remarry?" 1,000 assumptions must have been swirling in his head. He thought I had found new happiness, had a child with another man, a richer, better man than him. Pain, jealousy, and a kind of loss, a lesson. were reflected in his eyes. He had once abandoned me, but he couldn't stand that I now had a new life, new happiness without him. But then, an even stronger contraction hit me, snapping me back to reality. "Ah!" I screamed. Both hands clutched my belly, my entire body doubled over. I had no time to explain, no strength to argue with him. My child's life was the most important thing now. "Doctor, quickly, save my child." I looked at him, my voice full of pleading, mixed with resentment. My scream was like a bucket of cold water dousing Malik's confusion, bringing him back to reality. He flinched. The conscience and duty of a doctor overcame all personal emotions. He hurriedly pulled on gloves, turned around, and spoke loudly to the medical staff. His voice had regained calm, determination, and authority. "Everyone to positions. Fetal heart rate is dropping. Maternal blood pressure is rising. Breech presentation. High risk for a complicated delivery. Prepare the auxiliary instruments quickly." The entire team immediately worked fast and professionally. Malik leaned over me. He was no longer the guilty ex-husband. He was the responsible doctor again. He pulled down the mask, revealing his face, which was drawn and haggard compared to before. "Amara, listen to me." He looked me straight in the eye. His voice was both stern and strangely calming. "You need to be absolutely calm, right now. Put aside all personal emotions. Think only of the baby. Breathe deep. Exhale. That's right. Trust me. No matter what happens, I will bring the child to safety. Do you hear me?" I looked into his eyes. They were the same eyes, but now they weren't evasive, not guilt-ridden, but full of the determination of a doctor's promise. I nodded through my tears. What an irony. The man to whom I had to entrust the lives of both of us at that moment was the very one who had betrayed me. But I had no other choice. The birth was incredibly difficult and dangerous. As expected, due to the breech presentation and the premature labor, after many hours of battling the pain, I was almost at the end of my strength. There were moments when I thought I couldn't go on. My consciousness began to blur, but then Malik's voice rang in my ear, firm and full of power. "Come on, Amara, don't give up. Just a little more for the baby. Think about the child." He called my name. He transferred strength to me through the truth he had just realized. And then, after one last push, after moments of unbearable pain, a cry sounded. "Wah! Wah! Wah!" A clear, loud cry, like the best music in the world, tore through the tense atmosphere in the delivery room. My child was born. A boy, weighing 7 pounds, 2 ounces, adorable and healthy. "Congratulations!" the nurse cried out with a joyful voice. I breathed a sigh of relief. My entire body relaxed. Tears of joy streamed down my cheeks. But when I looked at Malik, I saw him standing motionless. He held the tiny pink life wrapped in a white towel in his arms. He looked at the child, then at me. His eyes were wide open, full of shock, unspeakable excitement. He looked at my child's face, a face that was a spitting image of his own. From the eyes to the high nose to the shape of the ears, all doubt was dispersed. No DNA test was needed. One glance was enough. "My blood, the boy, this boy," he whispered with a trembling voice. He looks just like me." Then he looked at me. His eyes were full of doubt, but also hope. "Amara, tell me the truth. Is this child really mine?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. A tired but satisfied smile. My silence was the clearest answer. In that moment, Malik completely broke down. He was no longer the calm, talented doctor. He was just a man, a father confronted with the cruel truth and unbearable guilt. He had left his wife without knowing she carried his blood. He had missed the entire sacred 9-month journey, and now he had to deliver with his own hands the child he had cruelly abandoned. There was no crueler, more bitter punishment. He sank to his knees next to my bed in the middle of the delivery room. He still held the tiny baby in his arms, carefully, as if it were a priceless treasure. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. He burst into tears, the weeping of a sinner full of remorse. "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive your son." He repeated those words over and over, to the bewilderment of the entire medical team. The moment the child cried at birth was the moment all his emotions of guilt, regret, and somewhat belated happiness erupted. But he didn't know that outside, another storm was being prepared, a storm of jealousy and envy, ready to destroy this sacred and tragic moment. Dear listeners, after the dramatic and tearful birth, I was moved to the VIP recovery suite, a room I might never have dreamed of in my life. It wasn't a hospital room, but more like a mini presidential suite. Everything was exquisite, luxuriously furnished, and the large window overlooked the brightly blue sky, a peaceful hospital garden. My son, the tiny pink angel, lay peacefully in a beautiful bassinet next to my bed, sometimes moving slightly. I lay there, my body aching and exhausted from the difficult birth. But my heart was filled with a happiness and peace I had never experienced before. I had done it. I had fought alone. I had brought the child safely into the world. All the pain, all the humiliations of the past seemed to dissolve every time I looked at my son's sleeping face. As for Malik, after fulfilling his medical duty, he didn't leave. He stood silently in the corner of the room, like a silent shadow. His eyes were constantly focused on us and the baby. That look was full of remorse, regret, and the desire to come closer, to touch his child, but he didn't dare. He knew he no longer had the right. Every time I accidentally looked his way, he hastily bowed his head and avoided my gaze. His own guilt tormented him. He tried to say some words of apology, but I didn't answer. Not because I was still angry, but because I didn't know what to say. All words seemed meaningless in that moment. However, this fragile peace did not last long. The storm I had foreseen finally broke out, fiercer and more absurd than I could have imagined. The news that Dr. Malik Sterling, the husband of Kira, the lady of rank, had delivered a mysterious VIP patient who turned out to be his ex-wife, spread quickly. Perhaps a nurse had been too talkative, or it was another trick of fate. And this news reached Eleanor and Kira with the speed of wildfire. To them, it wasn't just a coincidence. It was an insult, a provocation, unforgivable. And what had to happen, happened. The door to my suite was violently burst open without knocking, without permission, with a bang that shook the floor. Eleanor and Kira, the two women I least wanted to see, stormed in like two angry lionesses, ready to tear apart their prey. Eleanor was crimson red, her hair disheveled. Even her designer clothes looked crumpled. Kira, although in her final month of pregnancy, still stumbled on high heels, heavily made up. Her eyes blazed as if she wanted to devour me alive. "You! How dare you show your face here again?" Eleanor screamed first. Her voice echoed contemptuously down the entire hallway, causing doctors and patients from other rooms to peek out. "My son already threw you out. How dare you cling to him? What tricks did you use to get him to deliver your baby here? Do you think because you have money for this pitiful room you think you're something? You are a true, shameless fox." Kira stepped right up to my bed. She looked at me scornfully, then looked at my sleeping child. Her gaze was full of malice. "You even gave birth to a boy. Congratulations," she said mockingly. "I wonder whose child it is. You were just kicked out, and you've already managed to give birth by another man. You're fast, or did you intentionally set a trap? Do you want to use this illegitimate brat to destroy my family, to get Malik back?" She insulted me. She insulted my innocent child, a child who knew nothing of the disputes of adults yet. The blood boiled in me. I could endure any insult against me, but I wouldn't allow anyone to touch my child with a single word. I tried with all my strength to get up. The post-birth pains shot through my body, but they were nothing compared to the fury in my heart. "Get out immediately. This is a hospital room, not a marketplace where you can cause scandals." "Scandals? Today I will teach you a lesson," Eleanor yelled, ignoring the attempts of the nurses to stop her. "Do you think because you have money for the VIP room, you're somebody? Don't dream of getting Malik back from my daughter-in-law. She's carrying my grandson, the heir. You and your illegitimate bastard have no chance. Mom, Kira, what are you doing? Malik, who had been standing silently in the corner the whole time, finally woke up. He rushed forward and positioned himself as a protective barrier in front of me and the child, spreading his arms out like a hen defending its chicks. This is a hospital, not a home. Be silent immediately. Get out of here. You dare defend her? Eleanor spun around and grabbed her son's scrubs. Sharp nails dug into his chest. Do you know the whole city is laughing at us because of her? They're saying you're sleeping with your ex-wife. You're still my son. Enough! Malik cried out desperately and painfully. For the first time in his life, he dared to raise his voice against his mother. I've suffered enough. I made mistakes. I lost everything. I don't want to make any more mistakes. Mom and Kira, go. I won't go. Today I will teach this creature a lesson. I will show her what decency is. Kira shrieked. Jealousy had robbed her of her sanity. She pushed Malik away and lunged at the bassinet where my son lay. He started to stir and cry because of the noise. She wanted to hurt my child. Don't you dare! Malik and I shouted simultaneously. I frantically tried to jump out of bed despite the pain to protect my son. But exactly at that terrible moment, as Kira's hand was about to touch my child, a cold, authoritative voice sounded from the door. Stop immediately! The entire room seemed to stand still. Everyone turned toward the door. There stood a man in a black suit holding a briefcase. His face was extremely serious. It was Tony Clark, my assistant and personal lawyer. He hadn't come alone. He was followed by 2 large security guards in uniform from a professional security firm and 2 police officers with very stern faces. The sudden appearance of the lawyer and the police overwhelmed the mother and daughter. You, who are you? Why are you here? Eleanor stammered. All her aggressive insolence had vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. Lawyer Tony didn't even acknowledge her. He walked straight up to Kira, who still stood frozen next to the baby's bed. He pulled out a thick folder of documents and a tablet. You are Kira Sterling, née Vance, correct? He asked in an icy voice. I am the attorney representing my client, a major investor. We have complete evidence that your father, Victor Vance's company, North Star Pharmaceuticals, has been engaged in fraudulent activities involving the manufacturing and sale of counterfeit medications, as well as tax evasion amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars. What? Kira's mouth dropped open. Her face turned paper white. You're lying. My father runs an honest business. You're slandering him. Slandering? Lawyer Tony sneered. He turned on the tablet, which showed a hidden video of Victor Vance receiving briefcases full of bribes from an official. All the dossiers, evidence, these videos, audio recordings, and the statements of the key witnesses have already been handed over to the district attorney's office, and most likely your father, your uncles, and everyone in that chain are working with them right now. He then turned to the police officers. As for Kira and Eleanor Sterling, they unlawfully entered a patient's room, disturbed public order, and insulted and slandered other individuals. My client demands strict punishment according to the law. Kira's whole world collapsed. She staggered and fell to the floor. Her father, the entire pharmaceutical empire, her pride, and her only supports, shattered in a single moment. Eleanor stood there, her entire body trembling. Finally, she understood everything, from her son's clinic bankruptcy to the collapse of her in-laws' family. None of it was a coincidence. Behind it was an invisible hand, a terrifying force controlling everything. And that force was the very modest, barren daughter-in-law they had cruelly thrown out. She had incurred the wrath of a person they should never have messed with. Their show was truly over. The police asked Eleanor and Kira to come for questioning. Kira cried and screamed hysterically. She couldn't accept the truth that she had lost everything in a single day. Eleanor no longer screamed. She was silent. Her eyes were glassy, empty, and lifeless. Perhaps only now did she understand that she had lost. She had lost on all fronts against the most useless daughter-in-law she had most despised. As they were being led past me, she suddenly stopped, looking at me with a gaze full of complex emotions, hatred and fear. "Who are you really?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just looked at her silently, with a look full of pity and coldness at the same time. The answer to that question she would probably never know in her life. As they were led away, only I, my son, and Malik remained in the room. He stood there, having witnessed everything from start to finish. He understood everything. He understood why his clinic had collapsed, why his wife's family had fallen apart. And he also understood the standing and the terrifying power of the ex-wife he had betrayed. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost a chance, a future he might never regain. He slowly walked toward me, then sank to his knees beside the bed. A familiar gesture, but the emotions were completely different. "Amara," he looked at me, his eyes red, full of guilt and despair. I understand everything. I am not worthy of your forgiveness. I don't dare ask you to come back, because I know I no longer have that right. I only ask for one thing." He looked at the small, sleeping boy, the child whose existence he hadn't known about just a few hours ago. Let me be this boy's father. Give me a chance to make amends for my mistake to my son. I won't ask for anything. I'll do anything. I'll work like a slave for the two of you. I just want to watch him grow up, to be allowed to call him my son. Please, I beg you." He hit his head on the floor, the crying of a man who had truly lost everything. I looked at him. My heart was full of conflicting feelings. Should I give him a chance? My child needed a father. But was such a father, a man who had once cruelly abandoned the two of us, a man who had kept silent in the face of injustice, worth it? I thought for a long time. I looked at my child, then at the man kneeling at my feet, and then I made my final decision. "Stand up, Malik," I said in a calm voice, without the slightest resentment. "You don't have to work like a slave for anyone. You are still the father of my child. That is a fact that cannot be changed. The blood flowing in the child's veins is yours. I cannot take that right away from you, nor do I want my son to grow up without knowing who his father is." A glimmer of hope flashed across Malik's eyes. "That means I can visit my son, take care of him, fulfill my fatherly duties?" I interrupted him. "Wait," I paused. I looked him directly in the eye. My voice became firm. "Only in your role as his father. As for the two of us, everything is truly over from the day you kept silent when your mother and she humiliated me. Love without protection is like a house without a roof. It can't protect anyone from a storm." He froze. He understood me. I could forgive, but I couldn't forget. The wounds he and his family had inflicted on me were too deep and would never fully heal. He had lost me forever. He could only stand from a distance, observe our happiness with our son, and spend the rest of his life in remorse and regret. That was perhaps the greatest punishment for him. Dear listeners, my story ends here. After that day, Kira's family officially filed for bankruptcy. Her father received a very harsh sentence for the crimes he committed. Kira and Eleanor were also punished according to the law for their actions. Malik lost everything. He had no career, no family, not even the woman who had loved him the most. He paid a far too high price for his weakness and ambition. As for me, I didn't return to him. I chose the life of a single mother. I had everything, money, status, but I realized that the most valuable thing that brings me true happiness is not that. It's the small life in my arms. It's the freedom of the soul to let go of the painful past and move on. I didn't have to seek cruel revenge because my inner peace, my happiness with my child, was the sweetest and most bitter revenge on those who had betrayed me. Dear listeners, this concludes another story from the Confessions of the Golden Era channel. Amara's journey, a path full of tears from the peak of a fragile happiness, the fall into the abyss of betrayal, to the powerful rebirth from the ashes, has probably left many conflicting emotions in your hearts. outrage at the cruelty of people, satisfaction at the triumph of justice, and sadness for the lost love. But after the dramatic events are over, the deepest and most valuable human lessons remain. Profound messages about how to live, how to love, and how to be human. The first and most important lesson from this story is an open and profound look at choices in love and marriage. Amara and Malik's love was once beautiful, a love that grew from difficult days, sacrifice, and compassion. But when he stood at a crossroads, on one side, 5 years of love, on the other, fame and career on a silver platter, Malik chose the short path without hesitation. He justified his choice by claiming he needed a woman who would be a stepping stone for him. But, dear listeners, he was wrong. He confused a stepping stone with a decoration. A true stepping stone is not something shiny to show off. A man's most reliable stepping stone is the woman who can walk through the storm with him, who understands, shares, and gives him a strong spiritual foundation. Amara, with her love and silent sacrifice, was such a stepping stone, but he didn't understand. He blindly chased the expensive decoration named Kira, and when it shattered, he lost everything. This story is a profound reminder to all of us, especially young people facing marriage. Marriage is not a business where you can use material criteria to weigh and calculate. The ideal life partner is not the one who can bring the greatest benefit, but the one who can walk through life's ups and downs with you. The person by whose side you can be yourself, calm and happy. Never sacrifice sincere love for short-term advantages or ambitions, because money and fame can be lost and found again. But once you lose a person who truly loves you, you may never find them again. Malik's fate, his loneliness, and his torment are the most expensive lesson for those who prioritize the material over love. Continuing the lesson on choice, Amara's story teaches us an incredibly valuable lesson about the value of a woman's independence and inner strength. Amara had a secret. She was rich and talented, but she hid it. She lived an ordinary life to find unconditional love. Her action may be controversial. Some will say she was foolish, that she tormented herself. But fundamentally, it shows a worthy aspiration. She didn't want her happiness built on a material foundation. She wanted to be loved for herself, and it was precisely her financial and intellectual independence that became the most powerful weapon in the face of tragedy. When her husband left her, she didn't break down, didn't plead, didn't cling on. Why? Because she knew she didn't have to rely on anyone else to live well. She had enough skills and character to rebuild her life herself. Her rebirth as a phoenix was not a miracle from heaven. It was the result of a long process of hard work, learning, and the independence she had quietly built. Her story is a strong message to all women. Never place your happiness entirely in a man's hands. Love is important, but it's not everything. Always develop your knowledge. Always have your own work. Always be financially and intellectually independent. Because when you can stand on your own 2 feet, you gain self-confidence and the right to choose. And even when a storm comes, even when you are betrayed, you will never break. You will have enough strength to overcome everything yourself and find the light, just like Amara. And perhaps one of the most moving and human lessons is the story of maternal love and forgiveness at the end. When Amara was confronted with betrayal, she chose revenge, a clever revenge that made her tormentors lose everything. But when she had everything, when the enemy knelt at her feet, she didn't completely destroy them. She paused. Why? Because of the appearance of a small life. The child softened her heart, giving her a reason for generosity. Sacred maternal love conquered hatred. She realized that while revenge could bring temporary satisfaction, it would keep her trapped in the past, in negative emotions, forever, and she didn't want her child to grow up in an atmosphere of hatred. Amara's forgiveness toward Malik was not consent to reunification. It was forgiveness at the highest level. She forgave not for his sake, but to free her own soul. She allowed him to fulfill his fatherly duties, not because she still loved him, but because she thought of the child. That was wise and strong generosity. It teaches us that holding on to grudges only tires us out. Sometimes letting go is not weakness, but strength. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but allowing the past to rest so that we can look toward a better future with ease. Amara's greatest happiness at the end of the story is not the successful revenge, but the inner peace she finds as she holds her child in her arms and looks toward a bright future. Amara's story is complete, but the messages it leaves will resonate forever. It teaches us sobriety and love, the value of independence, the power of generosity, and the character of a modern woman. It gives us the belief that no matter how much life pushes us into difficult circumstances, as long as we don't lose hope, dignity, and self-respect, we will eventually find true happiness, happiness created with our own hands. Did you enjoy my story? If you listened to the end, write the number 1 in the comments. If you liked it, you can support me by leaving a like on the video and sending me a small donation. You can find many similar life stories on my channel. Subscribe and check out the others too. I've highlighted 2 new stories that everyone loves. Thank you for being here. Until the next story.